Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. Kind of trying to get the right angle on this camera here. So, a couple of things. First, man, I am just worn out. We've been running so hard. We had 6 loads for last week, so paid today, and we're on another load. We're at the Salt Lake Terminal right now, and this load's going to Portland. So we're supposed to have it over there on Sunday. So we'll just take a leisurely stroll over to Portland, and I don't know, maybe one of us can get a 34 in while we're over there, because I'm not super confident um, in what is going to be available on Monday. And when I took the load, I didn't, sometimes when you're out on the road, you really don't, sometimes you don't even know what day it is. I mean, you kind of know when you got to deliver, but you're not paying attention to the days, and especially when somebody gives you a load and they're like, okay, you got 4 days to get it somewhere. And you're like, okay, that's got to be there. You don't think about the day after. So I kind of screwed up. And by the way, this wouldn't be the first time that I took a load. And I was like, oh, that's going to be an easy delivery, not too rushed. And then to find out that the following day is like a holiday. So shame on me for doing that again. But it was good mileage. So my trainee is, when we get done with this load going to Portland, I think she'll probably have like 2,000, 2,500 miles left. So, if we take a trip down to Southern Cal and then, head back, north or whatever, it'll be pretty quick. So by the end of next week, by this time next week, she'll be over 30K. So anyway, I wanted to talk about why I didn't take a load the other day, and I've talked kind of considerations for loads, but this was a load that it was going to a place. It was nothing about money, because it actually paid probably like $3.50 to $4 a mile, and it would have been not too difficult a trip, but it was going to Olive Branch, Mississippi, which is, if you're not familiar with Olive Branch, is right. It's basically when you leave Memphis and you cross the border into Mississippi, odds are you're going to be in Olive Branch. That's how close it is to Memphis. And my comment to them was, I'll take this load, but only if you give me a pre-plan for a load leaving Memphis, because Memphis is not a place I want to hang out. And it's nothing against Memphis per se, because I've gone, years ago I would go to Memphis and go down to Beale Street, go to clubs, restaurants. There's a great music scene in Memphis. So there's a lot of good things about Memphis. But when you're driving a truck, the truck stops in anywhere close to Memphis are pretty sketchy. I've stayed at least one of them, and when I say this, I also include West Memphis, Arkansas, and places around there. So you got to go 70 miles or so to find a truck stop that's not like super sketchy. And again, it's not a commentary on anything other than the fact that truck stops in urban areas tend to attract all sorts of people, and not just truckers. And a lot of times the parking itself is not spacious. There's not a lot of room. There's a lot of guys that dump their trucks there because they're driving day cabs, or they're home on weekends or whatever, and so it's just all the things I don't like. So I rejected the load, and they're like, "Oh, this is paying really good." And again, it really irks me when fleet managers. And my fleet manager really doesn't do that, but dispatchers, night dispatch, when they're like, "Oh, this is the best paying load you're gonna find." it's like, dude, that's not the calculus for me. So I was like, okay, well, if you can't give me a backup load, if you can't give me an escape plan from Memphis, then I'm not taking this load to Memphis. I don't care if it pays $10 a mile. I don't want to go down there if I'm going to have to wait for 12 to 20 hours to get out of there. And I know from experience, I don't know that I've ever hauled anything out of the Memphis area, and I'll even extend that out 100 miles in any direction. I don't think I've ever hauled anything in a reefer out of there. I used to go down there doing dry van loads. GP Transco had kind of a big customer that had a facility in Olive Branch, and a lot of times they would get me a load, out of there. A lot of times it was paper or something like that, but never with a reefer. So anyway, that's why I turned that down. But I wanted to talk about something that I've been thinking about and kind of researching. And a lot of people are saying, oh, they're shutting down. A lot of authorities have been, motor carrier authority has been turned back into the government, where people said we don't want this anymore. And I think part of it is fuel cost. Part of it is what's available on load boards, from brokers, etc. So, but what I started, because I look at load boards, and in particular, I look at the DAT load board for one reason, because it's really easy to use. Even if you don't have an account, you can kind of peruse what's in a given area. And a lot of times, if I'm going to an area, I look at the load boards, the spot market, just to understand what the lay of the land is. It doesn't mean I'm going to get any of those loads, because maybe Prime is not using, those brokers aren't coming to Prime, and Prime might have contract accounts that I'm going to haul. But it's nice to understand what's coming out of a place and what the rates are a little bit. But what I started realizing by looking at these load boards was that a lot of places that might pay well going in, but are notorious for not having good stuff coming out, or even a lack of stuff coming out, people are probably avoiding. So they're avoiding the good rate going in, and a lot of shippers will pay the good rate going in because they know that a lot of people don't want to go there because of the backhaul potential or lack of it. So what I did was I took a look, and I started noticing that there are a lot of places that are kind of fall into that category of not great backhauls. Florida is one of them, certainly for us. It's either flowers or orange juice pretty much, but coming out. And I've only been into Florida twice ever in my trucking career. Once was for Prime, and I took a load to a Publix distribution center, and then I backhauled out of Tropicana. And then the only other time was a load when I was at Night Transportation, and it was going way down to South Florida, but there's so little coming out of there. My terminal manager was like, hey dude, take this to the FEC intermodal terminal in Jacksonville and put it on a train. And so I did that, and then they had something that had come out of South Florida that was sitting there in Jacksonville that I picked up. But they didn't want me running all the way down the Florida Turnpike or 95 or whatever. But so the place I looked at, though, was Denver. And what I did is I just plugged in some parameters. I just plugged in a couple of dates, and these dates are like a couple of days old, but I screenshotted a number of what I call micro loads. Now, I use the word micro load not to mean how much the load weighs, but really how far it goes. And what I realized is that if you took a load, let's say Denver, that pays well, let's say it paid $3 a mile, And, I know a lot of people don't think $3 a mile is good, but, if you're trying to stay alive, sometimes you got to take what's there. And so what I did is I said, if you took the approach that instead of going to a place and then immediately wanting to leave that area to get somewhere, you're going to necessarily limit your options. Now, some people might say, well, I don't want to hang around in Denver. I want to go home, or I want to get to a better place, or whatever. So, I kind of believe in the dollar cost averaging, right? Whether it's buying fuel or just how much you're making per mile that you drive, averaged out across all your loads. But what I started looking at is these micro loads. In other words, short loads that are basically local loads that are on these load boards that you could do while you're in a given area, while you wait for something suitable. Not maybe something awesome, but something suitable that you want to jump on and haul to the next area. And so what I did is on my Kenworth Mid-Atlantic pad here, I wrote down, let me see, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 loads that are kind of micro loads. And most of these loads pay really well per mile. And, and excuse me, and they don't go very far. In other words, some of these loads, you could do 2 of them in a day and still, make $1,000 in revenue for only driving like 250 miles. So I'm just going to go through this list and share and these were loads that had prices with them. Okay, so I don't know about some of the other short loads where you might be able to just say, hey, look, I need $4 a mile for that load, or I need $5 a mile for that load. Excuse me. So the first one is, by the way, the worst one. It's Denver to Monte Vista, Colorado. It's 217 miles and it pays $400. So that's not really great money. That's less than $2 a mile. The next one is Pueblo, Colorado, Cheyenne, Wyoming. It's 214 miles, but this load pays, and by the way, these are reefer loads. A lot of them are 40,000 pound loads. But this one is Pueblo to Cheyenne. It's 214 miles. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, that's 214 miles up I-25. So it's not going to be 214 really easy miles because there's a lot of traffic on I-25. There's a lot of traffic in the Front Range. But this load pays $1,300. So what is that? Like, $6 a mile. The next one is Colorado Springs to Denver. It's 68 miles. It pays $500. Colorado Springs to Denver. This is a different load, 68 miles, pays $550 per mile. Another one is Aurora to Granby. It's 96 miles, pays $700. Okay. Then there are 2 loads that are 0 mile loads. And one is Denver to Denver and the other is Aurora to Aurora. And they both pay 500 miles. Now, what that might be is somebody basically running something across town. The reason there's 0 miles, though, on the DAT is because if you're running something and it's a Denver mailing address to another Denver mailing address, even if it's 20 miles, it's still going to show up as 0 on DAT. So these loads are just like shuttles. $500. You could do 3 or 4 of those in a day. And again, this is just one load board. Another load, Littleton to Colorado Springs. So Littleton is a suburb of Denver. 65 miles, $650. Now, I'm not great at math, but I think that's $10 a mile. Another same it's a separate entity, or I mean, excuse me, a separate entry. Littleton of Colorado Springs, $65, $650. 65 miles, $650. Here's one, Longmont to Denver. So Longmont's up north of Denver. It's between Denver and Fort Collins. 35 miles, $400. That's over $10 a mile. And so what I'm suggesting here is that if you're running off these load boards and you want to, make some money while you wait for the unicorn load, right? While you wait for a good load, instead of sitting at a truck stop and idling your Caterpillar engine and running your AC, reach out to some of these entities that have micro loads and say, hey, I don't see what I'm looking for, because you can constantly monitor the load boards. You can set up alerts. And so while you're running that 68-mile load, you can pull over and say, yeah, I'll take this load going to Dallas, or I'll take this load going to Kansas City or to Chicago. And instead of sitting around a truck stop idling your engine, you can go do some stuff that makes you $10 a mile. And instead of sitting around for 24 hours making zero revenue and burning fuel sitting at the TA, you're making $1,000, and you could still sit at the TA at night, or whatever place you decide to park. And so I'm suggesting that this isn't easy, right? You got to do your research, right? I had to look stuff up, but if you do your homework, there may be opportunity in running short haul in an area until you find a great load leaving, and you'll still be available for the opportunity, because when you're running a 68-mile load, it's not like you're going to get caught out, right? Like, you could take a load that leaves the next morning or whatever. You're going to get unloaded. So I just share that with you. I've often thought that even like running, like if you look at the numbers in California, for example, a lot of guys run just intrastate in California. California has a whole system where you can just set up to never leave California. And I guarantee you could make a living doing that. With a day cab, it would probably be, it could be pretty lucrative. So anyway, if you like this idea about microloading, I like to hear about it. If I'm out in left field and it's not going to work, I'd like to know why. Because I'm one of those guys that I look at something and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to find a solution. I feel like a lot of people in this industry are really quick to say no. They're like, oh, here's why this won't work. And when I was in the military, I hated guys who were always seeing how we couldn't get something done. And those guys I didn't want to be around. I always want to be around people that figure out how to get stuff done. And if you got a truck and you need to make payments and you need to run, maybe doing these micro loads is a way to do it, where you could still use the spot market. You can still have high CPM, right? Because like I said, some of these are more than $10 a mile, because somebody's just got to get something across town. I mean, you got a load that's $500 and it's going 10 miles. I mean, come on, right? That's easy money. Even if it takes you 2 hours on the front end and 2 hours on the back end to get loaded and unloaded, it's still easy money, because you're not going very far. And $500, that's 100 gallons of fuel. So that's how you got to look at it, right? You got to make progress every day. I'm kind of fond of the saying that if you're not moving forward a little bit every day, then you're moving backward, because somebody else is going to be moving forward. And if you want to stick around in this business, you got to think out of the box a little bit. So anyway, thanks for watching. We'll keep you updated. Be safe out there this weekend. A lot of prime fleet managers on the road this weekend. So be careful around them and their four-wheelers, and around everybody else for that matter. So anyway, talk to you later, and thanks for watching.